Do you need encouragement to turn tragedies into your own triumphant life story? If so, this podcast is for you. Listen to powerful guests who have persevered through challenges so you can gain strength to build your championship life. The host of Professor of Perseverance podcast, Dr. James Perdue.
Hey, come on in. It's time for us to get started again today. Time for us to get some inspiration, some motivation. Grab a hold, some gold nuggets that you can use to help you get through your next trial and tribulation, your next challenge, your next hardship, your next difficulty, your next, whatever the hell you want to call it, but your next to help you get through. And don't forget, pay it forward, give it to the next person, use this gold and give it to them so they can get through something that they're going through. All right, today we're going to talk about, with children today, you have sometimes some speech and language therapy that they need to go through. And our speaker today, she has her own approach and she wants to share how she can help improve this for the parents and children. So welcome to the show. Let me get you up here. There we go. Jeaneen Tang.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, no. Thank you for coming here and blessing us with your knowledge, expertise, and how you can help the people in the future.
Amazing. Well, thanks for bringing me on. I've been a speech therapist for almost 24 years now, and I love it. I did not know what I wanted to do when I was growing up. I wasn't sure, except, thinking back, I don't know, people say, how did you become a speech therapist? I have to think back all the way to when I was about 8 years old. And my grandfather, he was sick. He had died of lung cancer when I was 8. And I remember at the time feeling super helpless and I wanted to help him more, but I was 8. You can only do so much, as a young child. But that really sparked this desire to want to help people and this desire to be helpful to other people. And so growing up, I thought maybe I want to be a teacher because, I had some really great teachers throughout my school years. And then I started playing sports in high school. And I thought, well, maybe I want to be like a physical therapist because, I had a couple ankle injuries. And I thought that could have been somebody that could have helped my grandfather. But I also really loved like English literature and writing and reading and stuff. So I knew that in order to be a physical therapist, I'd need a graduate degree. So I went and got my bachelor's degree in English literature and creative writing. And when it came time to apply to physical therapy school, at that time, it felt like everybody was applying to physical therapy school. And I was like, well, is it going to be saturated? Am I going to fit into that lifestyle of that schooling? And someone said, well, you did a lot of theater and you did some performance speeches in high school and college. Have you thought about speech therapy? And at the time, I hadn't really even heard about speech therapy. You hear about physical therapy, you hear about occupational therapy because people get injured a lot, but you don't really hear about speech therapy unless you yourself have had to go through it or somebody who's had to go through it.
Yep,
and so, right. Yeah, absolutely. So looking back, I was finishing my undergraduate degree up in Oregon at Pacific University, and I'm originally from Hawaii, Honolulu, Hawaii. And
there we go.
Yeah. So the University of Hawaii had a graduate program for speech therapy. So I thought it'd be a great opportunity to go home and get a degree and then, work at home in Hawaii because I never thought I would actually live anywhere else besides Hawaii. And at the time,
I wouldn't leave.
I know. People ask me all the time.
I've never been to Hawaii. I just know I've seen pictures and TV and it just looks beautiful. But I would imagine once you're living there, it's just home.
It is.
You're so used to it. It's no different than everybody else. Just home once you've been there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes, I grew up there. I was very comfortable there. And you don't appreciate it till you leave, right? So I left. Went to my senior year in Oregon, and then I was like, well, I want to go back home and I want to finish my schooling there. And at the time, and even now, speech therapists are, there's such a need for them, right? There was such a need for speech therapists in the schools that the Department of Education was offering a stipend for students that were getting a degree in speech therapy. They said, if you promise to work for us for 3 years after you finish school, we will give you a stipend for school. So
Hmm.
graduate school is pretty much paid for. So that was a no-brainer, right? I was like, well, they're going to help pay for school and I get a
That's a good
job.
bonus.
It was. And I was so glad I did because I learned a lot in grad school, but I learned even more after I started working in the schools because I had
Oh
such a
yeah, yeah.
great.
You learn more on the job.
Absolutely. I had such a great mentor. My personal mentor was Kathy Mayamori, and I'm still friends with her to this day. She's retired now, and she has taught me so much, but I also had a great team of other therapists, and like, you learn so much by being thrown in the trenches, right? I had so many kids to work with and so many parents to work with. And like, fast forward to now, I don't work in the schools anymore, but I work in early intervention for 0 to 3 years old, doing speech therapy. I have a handful of private school age clients, and then I also work
Hmm.
part time at a hospital with adults. So, speech therapy has been such a great profession for myself because it really fulfilled my need to help people. And it's such a gratifying way to develop young minds in order to have them communicate, as well as, working with older adults who may have lost their swallowing function or their cognitive abilities. And so it's kind of brought me to where I am today, and I'm very happy about it.
There we go. And we need more people like you. So my mom, she's 85, just turned 85 February, but she's got dementia going on, and she's had some illness last couple of years. And like you said, we've had a speech therapist come to help her, and it wasn't for talking and everything. It was more trying to improve her memory a little bit. But also, I didn't realize that you just said him when he told me that sometimes they don't eat and drink like they used to, and goes down what we used to say, down the wrong pipe, and then having them to learn to retrain to get that corrected.
Yeah, oftentimes with dementia too, they just kind of forget what they're doing because they're distracted or something. Some people are, they just automatically eat, and they might be very confused, but that's the one thing they can do is eat. And then there's some
Yeah.
people who struggle because they have lost the attention and coordination to eat. So it's so many different people that we work with across the board. And I love, people say, why don't you work full time, in one population? Because I work part time in early intervention and part time with older adults.
Hmm.
And I just love both. A lot of
Yeah, I
people will
would. I would want the
specialize.
variety. I
Yeah.
would want to get the variety than just one standard thing. So yeah. Um, well, I know I'm changing the subject a little bit with the dementia. There's two things I've come to learn that with her and at 85 and her, I've never had children, but now I'm raising one. Having to remind her, mom, get something to eat, get something to drink. Hey, let's get up and go take this, whatever, and having to just remind her. And she's up and going. She could talk, tell you anything 50 years ago, just can't tell you things 5 minutes ago. And as type she has. But another thing I've come to the conclusion, I'm sorry, I'm probably wrong. Nobody take this advice. This is only for me speaking, but I would rather pass away at 79 than be in that shape like that. Um, just 79, she was more normal. So I would prefer that. So, again, nobody takes advice from that. That you got your own opinion. You do your own thing. That was just me. If I ever, of course, we never know what's going to happen until we're already there. So, and again, I'm a firm believer. If we all live long enough, we're going to be there.
Yeah, possibly. My grandmother, she passed away, I mean, years ago, in maybe it's like 16 years ago or so. 18 years ago, yeah, 18 years ago. And her mind was very sharp. Her body just was not
Yeah,
working anymore. So
yeah,
there's you either finish your life not remembering because of dementia or short-term memory or whatever it is, but your body is okay, or your body starts to go, but your mind is still there. So I don't know which one I would prefer, my body going or my mind going, you know.
I might be able to help you with that. I got my neck broke playing football, and I'm in a wheelchair. I was told I never walk again. Maybe not move from my neck down. Obviously, I can. So, but um, I've said multiple times over the years, I'm glad that I got paralyzed and lost everything instantly than Lou Gehrig's disease, where you're losing everything slowly. And so the same thing, I would much prefer keeping my mind and losing my body than the other way around. So again, that's me. Don't everybody know that to you. Don't go do anything drastic because I said it. That's just me. So all right, now let's get back to your topic. That's why you're here. All right, so doing the speech therapy. Um, Now I would think again with the elderly, it depends how old and if they got mental capacity going on, things like that. But I would think it would be difficult working with the young ones. You said what, 0 to 3?
Yeah, by the time they see me, they're usually about 18 months to 2 years old.
Yeah.
Ideally, ideally I see them by 2 years old, because when the parents wait, and a lot of parents are in denial, or they're just
Oh
hopeful.
yeah.
They're more hopeful, right? They're like, my child's going to be okay. My child's normal. And they wait till the child is 2 and still not talking.
Oh
And then
yeah.
they're like, okay, I'll get help now. But by the time the child gets evaluated and approved for therapy, then the child's 2.5, and then the early intervention services end at 3 years old. And if the child still needs speech therapy or other therapies after 3, then that would be transitioning to the school, like the public school system. And
Hmm.
then the child could be covered by then. But I'm a strong believer about early intervention, and the sooner that you address issues that the child might have developing, the sooner you can,
Oh yeah.
catch that child up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So by the time I rarely will get a child under 18 months old unless there is, some severe health issues that the child was born with that really impacted their ability to develop. Like maybe they had seizures, or they had no oxygen to the brain where the child
Hmm.
wasn't
Hmm.
developing and they needed stimulation from very early on. But I'm usually one of the later therapies, because a child typically wouldn't start saying their first word until about a year, right? So you want them
I
to
have
be
no idea.
babbling. Well, I'll tell you.
I'm
Okay.
trusting you.
So when you think about 1 year, 2 years old, 3 years old, you think a child's going to be saying their first real word about 1 years old. So their first real word is something that they say consistently and meaningfully, whether
Mom and
it's
dad.
mom, dad, ball, car, up. They're going to say something that's meaningful, and they do it consistently. And then
Hmm.
by 2 years old, you're going to have them combining 2 words. So like up, please, more bubbles, like mommy hug. And
Okay.
then by 3 years old, you want them to be combining at least 3 words. So 3 words, 4 words, 5 words. And then as they get older, having longer sentences or more descriptive words in there, and have conversations.
But
But
then you get
before,
older and people going, I wish they'd be quiet.
exactly, exactly. Or where did you learn to talk back? Uh,
Oh yes. Yeah, that's a natural, I think. So
But before 1 years old, you would expect the child to be babbling, right? The child will start making sounds. They might just be making a coo or
mhm.
some kind of babbling. And then those sounds, those babbles will start mimicking or mirroring adult speech as far as like intonation and the rise and fall of the sounds, the different elongations or shortening of different sounds. So they'll kind of sound like they're adults or people talking, but you don't know what they're saying. And then eventually those will form actual words. So that's ideally how a child will normally develop. But if a child is not, developing that way, if a child's not speaking by saying their first word at 13 months, 14 months, kind of be more aware. That's a red flag. If they're
Mm-hmm.
not speaking, 15, 16 months, I would recommend that they look into getting early intervention speech therapy, because if they're not saying their first word by, 14, 15, 16 months, maybe they need just a little bit of help to either teach the child and the parent, different strategies on how to work with the child better.
Yeah. Now, when I was in school, fourth, fifth grade, I think, third, fourth grade, and I had to see a speech therapist. Not that I couldn't talk. Mine was I slurred my S's, slurred. So they were trying to get me to pronounce with the S correctly, was mine. So, but I remember when I had my injury, I had this one nurse, and boy, I slurred my S's. I knew she completely left them off. She come in one day, she goes, Jane, oh, what's wrong? You got an update stomach? Do you want a strawberry pie? So sweet girl, sweet woman nurse. But yeah, I was going, wait a minute, she's kind of leaving the S's off. So
Wow.
but she was sweet girl, so sweet girl woman. So, and also I was going to say, what was I going to say? You're talking about your speech there. Oh, this is still in the realm here that people with autism, they don't maybe not speaking at like you said at the level. And one day I was at the store with my service dog, and we were at the store taking him in, let him walk, and a woman come up and asked me could her son pet my dog, and I said sure, and I put him dog up in my lap a little bit for him to be able to reach and pet the dog from the buggy. And then all of a sudden he points at my dog and he says, dog. I said, yes, sir, buddy, it's a dog, like that. And then I looked over and mother was crying. And I go, I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't know what my dog did, but I apologize for it. She said, no, you don't understand. My son is autistic. He had to have been 3, 4 years old, maybe 5, and
Mhm.
says, that's the first word I've ever heard him say, and pointed and said dog, which made me think these children, adults that have trouble communicating, they're getting the information in, because he didn't call my dog a cat. He didn't call him a toilet seat, a doorknob. He called him a dog. So, which means they're getting the information in. Somehow they're just not processing it to get it back out. But made me think about that when you were talking about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, children or people with autism, they are usually quite intelligent. They're quite intelligent, but they just have a different way of, being able to express themselves, right? So it's a spectrum. So some
Mm-hmm.
kids are not nonverbal, completely nonverbal. They might be able to understand. Um, some kids are so severe that they have other behavioral issues, and they just, they're not able to even appear to understand, follow directions, and they're not going to be able to communicate verbally. They might be able to communicate with pictures or using some augmentative assisted communication system like an iPad. And then there's other kids who on the other side of the spectrum are super verbal and they're so smart, but maybe socially inept. Like they just don't
Yeah.
get it, how to enter a conversation or have peer relations. And so it's a huge spectrum, and it's amazing to see that there are so many different kinds of people and children that who develop in different ways. And for that child to say dog, his first real word, maybe he had never really even seen like a dog in person, or maybe it was such a high kind of like motivation or memorable
Well,
thing for
the
him.
thrill that he's petting a dog and
Yeah.
may stimulate. Okay. I you know more about it than I do. I wouldn't have, I was just thinking he said dog and mother's excited. So
Yeah.
I didn't know the whole thing. Now, my brother, he never got a degree, but he worked at a parapro in the school system. I was a teacher for a couple of years, and we were at the same school. And he worked with autism children. My brother, I wish he'd have got his degree and become a teacher, but he was the autistic whisperer. There is one child that came in the 7th grade, and apparently when he was in 6th grade in the elementary, this kid ran off, and he was nonverbal, but he was violent. And he ran off like 17 assistants that's supposed to work with him that one school year. So my brother got him up there, had him for 2 years, and this boy, he loved my brother. I mean, he loved him. My brother had to correct him a few times to let him understand, you're not running me off like you did these others. And so the 6th grade, when they're coming up to 7th grade, they would bring that class up so they can see what room they're going to be in middle school, and see some of the parapros as teacher assistants saw Dylan, saw him working and doing things, and one of them started crying and says, "We never thought he would ever reach this level." And my brother, he's the autism whisperer, so he's
Yeah,
got a gift. He's got a gift with them.
absolutely. We need more of them out there because I think children with autism are very much misunderstood. And I think a lot of children with disabilities are misunderstood or interpreted as, not being able to learn things, not being able to be intelligent, and give their input in life and change the world in some ways.
Oh
And
yeah,
I'm not sure if you read the story about my son in my book, but my son is, he's in middle school right now.
you said book. Let
I
me get it
said
up
book,
here.
a book,
You said book.
yes.
Let me get it up there. No,
So
I
yeah,
haven't read it. I hadn't gotten it,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
I just got this cover to put up there for everybody.
Yeah. So, last year I published a book, Play Dumb and Sabotage, because I wanted to create a greater impact in the world, right? I wanted to be able to kind of duplicate myself in the best way possible. And I'm only one person, but if I put my knowledge into a book and have that be a conversation with someone rather than here's a textbook, it's a handbook that anybody
Yes,
can
yes,
pick up,
yes.
any parent, caregiver, teacher. And one of the personal stories I have in there is my son Che. When he was 13 months old, unfortunately, he had a fall from our bed and he hit his head just perfectly where there was a large brain bleed. There
Mm,
wasn't a cut or abrasion on the side of his head.
yes.
It was just, he cried for about a minute and passed out. And we took him to the emergency room. They did a CAT scan. They saw a large brain bleed. He had an emergency craniotomy. Um, because they needed to stop the bleeding. So they had to open up the
Hmm.
brain, open up the skull, stop the bleeding on the brain, close it back up. And the swelling in the brain caused him to have a stroke, which is a loss of blood flow to an area of the
Hmm.
brain. So it happened
Hmm.
in the same area that he had had the injury. And so in a matter of, split seconds, his life turned from a normal developing appeared, right? It appeared that he was normal developing to now a disabled child. And he fought for his life, really. We lived in the hospital for 3 months. He got some rehabilitation.
Mm,
He still has right hemiparesis because the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body.
yep.
So he doesn't use his right arm or hand functionally. But he is, slowly. We just saw his hand specialist, and she was like, well, he's paying attention to his right hand a lot more than he ever has. So he's slowly
Good,
by
good.
slowly getting better, But my son has, he when you talk about perseverance, he has that. He's in middle school now, and he's become such his own personality. And thank goodness I was a speech therapist already because, I knew what kind of
Oh yeah.
services he needed. And people ask me all the time, do you ever do speech therapy with Che? And I'm like, every day,
I
all the
was going
time.
to say 5 times a day.
All the time, every interaction I have with him, there's some kind of speech therapy going on because, my book is called Play Dumb and Sabotage. And I think as parents, he's my first and only child. And, as a first time parent, I wanted to make sure he was taken care of. He was, had the right clothes on. He was dry. He was fed, so we over anticipate. We learn how to know what the child needs before they even need it, so the child never has to really talk. But
Yeah.
what I found working in early intervention speech therapy, that a lot of kids who were physically sound, like developed fine, cognitively they seemed to understand everything that they were told. They were late talkers, not because they didn't have the ability to talk, but because their parents were very good parents and over anticipated the child's needs. They didn't want the child to cry. Right?
I
We don't
got
want
you.
our children to cry. We don't want them to be uncomfortable. So we tend to the child. We give them whatever toy they might want and put it right there in front of them, rather than, hey, let's put it just out of their reach so they can learn to move to the toy or to reach for the toy or eventually ask for the toy. So a lot of parents, they over anticipate their child's needs. And so the title Play Dumb and Sabotage really means to mindfully under anticipate. So know what your child needs, right? Because you should
Yeah. Yeah.
know as a
Yeah.
parent. But then kind of step back and let that child interact naturally with their environment. And then you can work on different sabotage strategies in order to have them practice. So sabotage is just another word for practicing, creating opportunities to practice things. So like during snack time, I tell parents, don't give them a whole plate of goldfish. Just give them a couple of goldfish and have the plate or bowl just in sight but out of reach, so they can indicate that they want more. Just
Yeah.
give them a
Yeah.
couple more. They can learn the sign for more. They can say more, and eventually say more goldfish, or I want more goldfish, please, eventually, right? Or have a toy that they love in sight, but maybe just out of reach, just higher than they can reach on a bookshelf or something where they're not going to hurt themselves, but they can indicate they want something. I like to put toys like in a container where children can't open it themselves, where they have to ask me like, open please, like
Mm-hmm.
I want ball, whatever it is. And so that helps them practice, right? So you were a coach, right? I heard you coached
Mm-hmm.
basketball.
I
Is that
did
correct? Yeah.
many moons
And
ago.
yeah, many moons ago. But think about it like shooting a free throw, right?
Like
You,
there's
you
our
know,
state championship ball.
nice,
We wanted to
nice. Very
skate one
good.
time.
Perfect.
I'm sorry, go, but
No,
yeah.
no, no. That's great.
But
But
I was going to say two things that you're making me think of. One, you're talking about parents over compensating, over anticipating, and then they're doing it instead of letting them, the children, experiment, try, on their own, see what happens. Makes me think of oh, what was that? What was that? What was that? Oh, I'm sure it's a lot better today. But it used to be when I was growing up, if someone was a stutterer, people wanted to finish their sentences for them instead of waiting patiently and allowing them to get it out to talk. And so hopefully that's a lot better today, that more people are patient for that. And the other thing you're talking about, letting them, the children, be able to basically perform on their own,
mhm.
they're let them have their desire, which made me think about this one video I watched. Mom and dad are in the living room, and the little boy that looked down is trying to put something in the electrical socket, and mother goes, "No, no, don't do that." And dad goes, "Wait, what do you think you're gonna do there, son?" And then he pushes it in there, gets shocked, and he
Oh
says, "Now I
no.
guess," he goes, "I guess you won't do that again, will you?" Like yeah. So that's two different types of training. So we don't recommend the other one, but it was a funny video.
Oh yes. No, I would be the mom. No, don't do that.
Your
Don't
dad
do
goes, "Wait, what you gonna do there?"
that.
So
But going back to the basketball metaphor, it's like you wouldn't just, if you were going to practice your free throws, you want to do it consistently and have lots of repetition, right? In order to do it correctly. So same thing like language. You want to be able to practice it and practice it. And a child doesn't know vocabulary unless they've experienced it or been introduced to it. So when my son was little, I would say, "Hey, what do you want to wear today? Do you want to wear the blue shirt or the green shirt?" And I would hold them up about shoulder width apart So he can see them, he's heard the vocabulary, and then even if he can't speak, he can look at one of them or reach for one of them, and then I would give him that vocabulary. So if he looked at the blue
Mhm.
shirt, I would say, "Oh, yeah, let's wear the blue shirt. It's a great choice. I
I
love
would have gone with
blue."
blue.
Yeah, I love
I would
blue.
have picked blue. Blue's my favorite color.
Me too, me too. But you wanna give them that vocabulary, so even at snack time, "What do you wanna eat? You wanna have a banana or do you wanna have an orange?" You'd hold up a couple
Banana.
things, a couple options, because I'm not sure, if you've ever gone down the rabbit hole of yes and no questions, but if you ask a child, "Do you wanna have an apple?" And they say, "No." "Do you wanna have you wanna have a banana?" "No." "Do you wanna have a orange?" "No." And then you're, like, asking them all these yes, no questions, and if they say no, like, what are you gonna do? But if you give them choices, that's very helpful.
Mhm.
And another thing that parents and teachers, a lot of people will say is like, "Are you ready to work? Are you ready to brush your teeth? Are you ready to go to bed? Are you ready to can you pick that up? Can you do this? Can you say this?" And if a child says no, what are you going to do? Right. So I have a lot of parents ask these yes, no questions. And when a child says no or indicates no, it's almost like you're going to do it anyway. Right. Are you ready to go to bed? No. Okay. Well, we're going to bed
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I always one of my chapters in my book is don't ask a yes no question unless you're ready to honor that no.
That's right.
So so a lot of
Yeah,
times I'll tell
if you're giving them that and they say no, you can't go, "No, no, that's not what I want you to say."
absolutely, right? I tell parents offer choices if you really want something to be done. So like even for my son, I'll be like, "Hey, we have to cut your nails. Do you want to do it today or tomorrow?" And that's more like a decision making. He feels like he's in the power position of like, "Oh, I
Yep,
get to
yep, yep.
decide when I'm doing it." Or I'll tell a child, "Hey, I have a book and a puzzle. Which one do you want to do first?" And then we're going to do both of them, right? But which one do you want to pick first?
Yeah,
Rather
yeah,
than, "Do
yeah.
you want to do a book?" No. "Do you want to do a puzzle?" No. So it's giving them that power to choose, and also, getting them to be more cooperative because, you know, it helps with behaviors when the child is making the decision and then they don't feel like you're forcing them to do something that they don't want to do per se.
I like, the giving the choices again, and again, it gives them a chance to give input and to control some of their decision makings. Feel like a little power is put in there with it, so and build confidence as well. I like the yeah, give them the choices like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And some things, one of the best strategies I have for parents as well is to slow your speech down just a little bit. Sometimes, they say don't do baby talk. And yes, don't do baby talk to your child. But also, some parents or adults, when we have conversations, we speak very quickly to each other, right? And some parents tend to speak very quickly to their children. And it's almost like learning a new language, right? You're trying to understand where the breaks in these words are in order to make a sentence or understand a question or have meaning for vocabulary. And if someone's speaking very quickly, you don't hear those breaks. But if you just speak a little bit slower to a child, they can actually absorb and digest what you're telling them. And then they're able to express themselves better because they understood you a little bit better. And some parents who speak very quickly, it's so hard for them to slow down. But once they do, they're like, "Oh, my child understood me better." And I'm like, "Yes, just slow your speech down because you're modeling it for them." And if you can model it a little bit slower, then the child's able to imitate that at a decent pace and then slowly pick that pace up as they grow older.
All right, everybody, you heard it from Jeaneen personally. Talk Southern. We usually talk slower, usually, and so talk Southern. To now, also, I would think also that you made me think, and I've never really thought of this, but it made me think. You know, talk a little slower and everything, but also group whatever you're talking about simple. Don't give them a 10-page thesis, and then they're having to take their mind and break all that down. Give them the one thought, what you want done, then come back with your next thought, what you want them done. So don't give them 4 or 5 things at one time.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's something called what we call language bombardment. We
Yep.
have a child listen or absorb, but not require them to imitate everything we're saying. And there's also something we call scaffolding. So starting with something small, like a target word, whether it's ball, right? And then we're going to add on a description. So big ball. Oh, the big red ball. The big red ball bounces. Ooh, catch ball, throw ball. Ooh, I throw ball to you. So you can have these short words and then
Mm-hmm.
build upon it in little phrases and then longer sentences to make them more specific and descriptive. And slowly by slowly, the child's able to understand each of those terms and then express it themselves.
There you go. Good. Let me ask, and I'm sure this is a dumb question, but again, I don't have children, so I have no idea. But even though I taught 7th grade for a while, but again, you're talking again 0 to 3, basically. Who's more excited when they first are catching on to the words, the child or the parents? Or the child,
Oh.
it doesn't matter to them because they're thinking, well, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing or whatever, and it's the parents all excited.
Yeah, I would say, thinking about it, I would say the child is learning through play, right? With this early intervention, everything is done through some kind of play. So they love playing. So
Oh
they're
yes,
excited just to play. But they don't realize that they're expressing
learning as they're
themselves.
playing.
Yeah, because it's play. I'm not like, telling them, "Okay, you're doing so much better." It's like, "Oh, yay, high five. Let's have fun." But I think the parents are really great indicators of how the child is doing, because when the child learns to speak a little bit more and the parents are understanding them more, the parents are the ones who are lighting up and saying like, "Oh, this is what they said the other day. They were talking about this and that." And it's like, "Oh my gosh, I understand them so much." And I have this one little girl, her name is Rose, and I've worked with her since she was 2.5, and she has
Hmm.
autism. And she had very few words at all when I started working with her. And now I think she just turned 5 or something. And she is so verbal. And her parents are always like, "Oh, we went to this birthday party, and she introduced herself to this person she didn't even know," which is something she would never have done. And being on the spectrum of autism, you wouldn't expect them to be so social, but she is. And, to see the parents light up is like what is a great indicator of how the child is doing, and a reflection of like all the work that you've put in, through the therapy session. So it's rewarding to see the parents be so happy.
There we go. So, John Bentley, thank you for showing up here, buddy, and listening in. John Bentley said he's got Southern ears, which means he's a slow listener. So, hey, you're in Alabama. That ought to explain it there, John. Roll Tide. All right. So, yep. So, I remember one time, this is 7th grade though, that we had our parent conference, not conference, but open house early in the school year, and one parent came up to me and talked about their daughter and said she's very shy, she doesn't talk much, that we want her to express herself more. And I said, by the time she gets out of my room, I'll have her written up for talking too much. Like, yeah, because I encourage, yeah, we taught science. So
Yeah.
I definitely want you asking questions while we're doing this. And I never wrote her up, but I hope that mom and dad were able to see that she learned to open up more through my class. I wanted them to talk,
Yeah.
to learn.
Yeah, I
So
think one of the best things, the best comments to hear from parents when I start working with a child and they're basically nonverbal, the best comments are, "Now they won't be quiet."
that's right.
Like,
That's right.
now they won't be quiet. They won't stop talking. I'm like, "Well, you wanted them to talk."
You wanted to uncork the genie out of the bottle. So, all right, Jeaneen, I appreciate you being here. You gave us a bunch of good information here. I appreciate that for people that maybe needing some information, need some help with this. And I really, again, I don't have any children, so, but I can understand, like you said, with 18 months, people are finally stepping up and a little late because they're not babbling and gooing on and not making suggestions. I can see where people are just going, oh, they're just taking their time and in denial, like you said, and then they're in panic mode before they know it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I would love for, this book is for anybody who either works with kids, has a child, knows of a child, because I really would love to really decrease the number of children who need early intervention speech therapy. People ask me, well, if you write this book and it works, then aren't you afraid of not having a job? And I go, no, no, I will always have a job
That's
because
right.
there's such a need for speech therapists. And, the strategies that we do are teachable, right? Any parent can learn them. And I always say, as a mother, I had to go through birth training, right? Before I had my son, you learn how to put a diaper on, you learn, how to hold a child when you're feeding them. But when you have a child after that, what happens? You don't learn how to really interact with your baby, how to develop language, what are different strategies you can use. And then you don't always ask for help because you think, that's your ego that's involved. It's like, well, if
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
need help as a parent, that means I'm not a good parent. And that's totally not true. It's like
Exactly.
there are professionals for different things. If my toilet's broken, I'm going to call a plumber. I'm not going to really try to fix it myself. It's
They're going to call the guy with the fix your refrigerator to do that. That's right. You're going to get somebody who knows exactly what they're doing. I'm
yeah.
one of them, and it took me a long time. Trust me, Jeaneen. With me, before my injury, being the independent jock athlete, always doing things. My dad died when I was 16, so I became the man of the family. Helping my mom and brothers and stuff. Uh, when I got hurt, it took me a long time for me to swallow my sinful pride to ask for help. And things. And I've come to learn asking for help is a power strength. Know your limitations, and instead of suffering through things, ask for help. And there's
Yeah.
plenty of people out there that want to help, but they
Yeah.
don't know what to do if you don't ask.
Absolutely. And I had this one little boy who was just over 2 years old, and he was babbling but not saying like a lot of real words at all. And I was talking to his parents about speech therapy and how, you know, their child would benefit from it. And the dad, he looked at me and said, well, what can you do for my son that I can't? And I said, well, then you have to break down, it is, I went to school for this, I have a degree in this. This is what I specialize in. I'm not saying that you're not a good parent. It's just, you just need a little bit of help. And, that child did enter speech therapy with me, and he became very verbal. And you just see the disposition of the parents change because they went from
Yeah,
defensive to appreciative. And then, like, their whole world changed after that.
yeah. So yeah. People ask for help. No need in suffering and guessing. And there's nothing wrong with going and do your own research and trying to help figure out things. But you ever get to something that's really ask for help. People out there want to help. They want to. All right. Jeaneen, appreciate you being here. Boy, it's been a great meeting you and everything. And you have definitely found your gift. Earlier in this podcast, you said, growing up, you didn't know what you wanted to do and everything. You found your gift, that's for sure.
Thank you very much.
So, all right, Jeaneen, we know there's people that are hurt and struggling. If you can leave them with a positive message to help them get through today.
I always thought about living by the golden rule, right? We say treat others as we want to be treated. And I always tell my son, if you want to have friends, be friendly to people, right? If you want other people to care for you, care for other people. Be positive if you want people to be positive towards you. So I think if you're struggling through something, kind of put out in the world what you want back. So if I want to be helpful, if I want help, or if I want joy, I'm going to try and give out help. I'm going to give out joy. So if you are feeling sad, give someone a smile. I think one of the best things is when you walk in the street, when you smile at someone, they will normally smile back. 9 out of 10 times, they'll smile back. So if if you're feeling a little bit down, give a little bit of sunshine out and it'll come right back.
Amen, sister. Yeah, I'm one of them that you don't know what everybody's going through. And I like to try to, when I'm passing someone, to at least acknowledge, hey, how you doing, buddy? Because that may be their only acknowledgement they got that day.
Yeah.
And to let them know there's still a person here on earth. And so I tried to, hey, what's up, buddy? And just move. You don't have to have a 14-minute conversation, just a simple acknowledgement, how you doing today, and move on. So, all right. Thank you for that good word there, sister. You got it on the good side. So, all right, everybody else. John, again, thank you for coming in with them Southern ears. And everybody else, share it with someone that you know that could use this. Jeaneen gave a bunch of good. Jeaneen, you're letting me get away with this. Give us all your social media, how people can get a hold of you. Come on.
All right. Thank you.
Don't let me get away from that.
The best way to get in touch with me is via my website. It's playdumbandsabotage.com. And from there is links to my Instagram, which I have a personal one, is JT808. And my book book on Instagram is Play Dumb and Sabotage. They can also have links for my book on there from Amazon as well.
And I'll put the links in the show notes, make it a little easier for people that are there. They can click on them as well. So, all right, Jeaneen, thank you again for being here. You're an awesome person, and I hope your son gets better, keeps improving as we go along through here. So, everybody else, I'm Dr. James Perdue, the professor of perseverance. Do something today, tomorrow, something next week that's going to help you persevere past your